Welcome, Ombuds. This deep dive is designed to support your journey in becoming trauma-informed practitioners within organizations. Consider how trauma awareness intersects with your core values: neutrality, confidentiality, independence, and informality. Your trainer and Ombuddy, Angela Dash, invites you to reflect deeply on how these concepts we will be discussing, how they can support you in reducing harm and better supporting visitors in distress. So we're taking a look at a stack of material exploring the importance and the practical application of trauma-informed practices specifically for organizational ombuds. The mission today is simple but crucial: to extract the core insights to help you understand why this perspective is essential and, how you can actually integrate it into your daily work.
Right, and these sources, they really emphasize that understanding trauma isn't just like a nice-to-have skill for an ombuds. They frame it as foundational. It fundamentally changes how you approach interactions, especially when someone is coming to you in a state of distress or anxiety or conflict that might be rooted in really, really difficult experiences.
Okay, let's unpack this first piece then. Why is being trauma-informed so, well, essential for ombuds? The sources really drive home the point that trauma, whether it's personal history, something societal, or even workplace related, it has a profound and lasting impact on how individuals function and interact within an organization.
Hmm.
And you, as the ombuds, you're so often the very first point of contact for someone carrying that weight of distress.
Precisely. And what's fascinating here is the neuroscience, they touch on the sources, talk about how trauma can actually rewire a person's stress response system.
Mm.
Their brain and body might perceive threat even in situations that seem neutral to others.
Mm.
Think about it. A sudden loud noise, maybe a strong voice, even a feeling of being trapped or unheard.
Mm.
These things, which might be minor to one person, could trigger a significant trauma response in someone else. If an ombuds isn't aware of this, they could inadvertently, step on a landmine,
Right.
triggering or worsening that person's distress, which of course is the absolute opposite of the safe space you're trying to provide.
That makes total sense. So the first core reason highlighted is about creating those truly safe and supportive spaces. It's more than just like physical safety, though that matters too. It's about psychological safety, an environment where visitors feel genuinely heard, respected, and critically not judged for their reactions or their story.
Yeah.
This feels especially vital during times of heightened stress or loneliness, which frankly describes the organizational landscape for many people these days.
Yes, and tied directly to that is a crucial concept, the sources stress,
Mm.
reducing the risk of re-traumatization.
Ah, okay.
By understanding that altered stress response we just talked about, ombuds can intentionally adjust their communication, their pacing, and their processes to actively avoid triggering those old wounds. It's not about delving into or treating the trauma itself. You're not therapists, and the sources are very clear on that distinction.
Right, that's key.
It's about not adding to the injury, about preventing re-traumatization.
Yeah, do no harm is paramount. And being trauma informed sounds like a really powerful tool for that. And trauma often involves a profound loss of control, right? Or maybe a breakdown of trust in systems or people. Your role as ombuds, operating with neutrality and confidentiality, seems uniquely positioned to help counter this. The sources point out that being trauma informed intrinsically helps build trust and empower the visitor.
That raises an important question, though. How does it build trust? The sources suggest it's through fundamental ombuds practices, things like clear boundaries, absolute confidentiality, and within the stated limits, of course,
Sure.
transparency about your process, and informed consent at every single step. By explaining your role and what happens next up front, you give control back to the individual.
Okay.
They decide what to share, what options to explore, and whether to proceed. This act of empowering visitors to explore their own options rather than prescribing solutions is central to the ombuds' neutrality and is incredibly healing for someone who has experienced a loss of agency. It reinforces their independence in navigating their situation.
And it's not just about the individual visitor, is it? This perspective seems to have broader organizational benefits too. The sources argue that your trauma-informed practice contributes significantly to enhancing overall organizational well-being.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, when employees experience interactions, even difficult ones, through a lens of safety and support, they're more likely to feel seen and valued.
Right.
When people feel supported and safe, they are more resilient. This can potentially reduce misunderstandings, de-escalate conflict more effectively, and maybe even impact things like absenteeism by fostering a more psychologically safe environment. It benefits everyone.
Plus, there's the critical practical skill of recognizing and responding. Being able to identify potential trauma responses in the room, things like heightened anxiety, defensiveness, mistrust, difficulty concentrating, or even dissociation, that's crucial. But just as important is knowing your limits. Knowing when a referral to clinical professionals or other specialized resources is necessary.
Yeah.
That requires ongoing training and collaboration with other parts of the organization's support system, I imagine.
Absolutely. And the sources explicitly state that trauma-informed training doesn't just teach you about trauma. It gives you the specific actionable skills needed for the ombuds role.
Mm.
Things like creating those empathetic safe spaces, listening deeply without judgment, which directly supports informality, by the way,
Mm.
identifying responses, tailoring your support to the individual's needs in that moment, and knowing when and how to refer appropriately. It directly enhances your capacity to support visitors effectively because it enables you to genuinely offer choices and support their autonomy,
Right.
which in turn fosters trust and collaboration, all within the confines of your neutral and confidential role.
Okay, so if the why is clear, it's fundamental for safety, reducing harm, building trust, enhancing the organization. The next logical question these sources address is, how do we actually do this? It's about putting these principles into practice, especially in your communication and interaction style. The sources provide a lot of practical tips here, starting with the absolute foundation, safety and transparency.
And what's critical here is understanding that safety isn't just about the physical space. Though that's mentioned, of course, things like ensuring clear exits, having a quiet, private office that feels contained, maybe calming decor.
Sure, the environment matters.
Right. But it's equally, maybe even more, about procedural safety.
Procedural safety. What exactly does that mean? Like the predictability of the interaction itself?
Precisely. It means making your process as predictable and transparent as possible from the moment someone connects with you. Always start by clearly explaining confidentiality, what it means, what its limits are. Be open about your process. What happens in this meeting? What are the potential next steps we might explore together? What happens after they leave your office? This transparency builds predictability, which is incredibly stabilizing and empowering for someone who might have experienced situations where things felt out of their control or, unpredictable.
Yeah, I can see that.
It supports their independence in making informed choices and underpins the trust essential for informality to work. And avoid ambiguous promises. Be really clear about what you can and cannot do within your mandate.
That makes total sense. Knowing what to expect is itself a safety measure. And practical tips include allowing visitors to choose meeting locations if possible, giving them agency, and following consistent routines in your interactions. Building on that, there's building trust through empathy and non-judgment.
Yes. This involves using techniques like reflective listening, not just paraphrasing facts, but reflecting the emotion or the underlying message you're hearing. Phrases like, it sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed by this situation, or maybe, I'm noticing a lot of frustration as you describe this.
Hmm.
This shows you're truly hearing them on a deeper level and validates their emotions without necessarily agreeing or disagreeing with the content of their story. It creates that non-judgmental space that is essential for someone to open up.
And maintaining that non-judgmental stance, physically and verbally, encouraging openness isn't just about asking questions, right? It's also about affirming their strengths and resilience.
Exactly.
Phrases like, you've clearly shown incredible strength to navigate this, or it takes courage to reach out for support, and you've done that. This helps build their confidence and rapport with you. It tells them, I see you, and I see your capacity, not just your problem.
It absolutely does. And this leads to an important point about navigating complexity, especially when visitors might be feeling ambivalent, uncertain, or even sort of contradictory about their situation or potential next steps. Trauma can make decision-making really difficult.
So the sources suggest using open-ended but specifically invitational questions instead of a direct tell me what happened, which can feel a bit like an interrogation.
Right, it can feel demanding.
Try something softer like, would you feel comfortable sharing what's been on your mind? Or maybe, what feels most important to explore together right now?
This framing is key because it puts the control back with the visitor. It allows them to express mixed feelings or uncertainty without feeling pressured to commit to a narrative or a course of action immediately.
Okay.
You can ask things like, can you tell me a little more about that feeling?
Right.
Or gently invite them to weigh different perspectives or potential paths based on their values and their goals, always supporting personal choice and their independence.
Empowering visitors by framing the entire interaction as a partnership sounds crucial. Would it help to explore some possibilities together? That's a great phrase suggested in the sources.
It really is.
You're offering to walk alongside them, not lead them. Offer options, always phrased as possibilities to consider, not instructions or recommendations. And importantly, respect their need to pause, change direction, or even decide not to do anything at all right now.
Yes.
That, too, is a choice and an exercise of their autonomy.
And affirming their strengths and resilience isn't just for rapport. It's actually a strategy to help them build belief in their own capacity for action. Phrases like, "You've clearly thought this through carefully," or "You've shown resilience just by seeking support," can help visitors identify doable self-chosen steps aligned with their values.
And we absolutely need to be mindful of trauma-sensitive language and cues throughout the conversation. That seems critical.
Absolutely critical. This means being acutely aware of potential triggers in your language, or even your body language. If a visitor suddenly seems overwhelmed or withdrawn or maybe agitated, pause and check in with gentle curiosity. "I notice things seem difficult in this moment. How are you holding up?" Or maybe, "Would you like to take a brief pause?"
Okay.
Avoid language that pathologizes or implies fault or weakness. Instead of "What did you do?" or worse, "What's wrong with you?" which can sound accusatory or shaming.
Right.
Ask, "What happened?" or "Can you tell me about the situation?" This respects their experience and separates their identity from the problem.
The sources also strongly suggest avoiding pressing for details too early, especially graphic or highly sensitive ones, unless the visitor initiates it and it's clearly necessary for their goals.
Yes.
They mention practicing silent witnessing, which isn't awkward silence, but like intentional pauses that allow visitors space to gather their thoughts, manage emotions, and decide if and how they want to proceed.
Exactly. It gives them room. And definitely avoid minimizing or dismissive phrases like "just stay calm" or "it's not that bad" or "you're overreacting." Those phrases just invalidate their very real distress.
Yeah, completely undermines the trust.
Totally. Finally, the sources highlight the critical importance of cultural, historical, and gender awareness. We have to be incredibly sensitive to how these factors deeply influence someone's communication style,
Hmm.
their comfort level with authority figures or formal processes, their values around conflict or seeking help, and their decision-making processes.
Which means avoiding assumptions based on someone's background, right? Asking open-ended questions that truly allow visitors to share what is important to them from their perspective.
Yes.
And continuously reflecting on our own potential biases to ensure our approach is genuinely inclusive, respectful, and creates a safe space for everyone. This sensitivity upholds the principle of informality by meeting the visitor where they are.
Okay, moving on. One critical element the sources emphasize, which is really foundational to everything we've discussed, is the crucial role of self-awareness for the ombuds themselves.
This feels incredibly important and maybe something that gets overlooked sometimes. It's about understanding how your own experiences, your own history, your own potential triggers, and your current emotional state might affect your interactions with visitors.
What's powerful here is the point that this isn't just about managing your personal stress.
Mm.
Unrecognized or unaddressed trauma or stress in the ombuds can actually be activated or triggered by a visitor's story or distress. When that happens, it can potentially re-traumatize both you and the visitor, disrupting the safety of the interaction and compromising your capacity for neutral, objective support.
That's a really impactful point that your own well-being is directly linked to your ability to serve safely and effectively. Self-awareness, then, is key to recognizing those moments, setting appropriate trauma-informed boundaries, and maintaining objectivity in your neutral stance.
Exactly. And the sources state that engaging in the ombuds role, particularly through a trauma-informed lens, can actually deepen self-knowledge and emotional intelligence over time. As you become more attuned to subtle cues in others, you become more attuned to yourself.
Mm.
This enhanced self-awareness and emotional intelligence then further enhances your capacity for empathy and strengthens your ability to consistently create that genuinely safe space where visitors feel validated.
Witnessing other suffering is a necessary part of the job, isn't it? And absorbing that can take a significant emotional and physical toll over time.
It really can. Which raises an important question. Given that risk, how do ombuds manage that to maintain their capacity? Self-awareness is key to recognizing the early signs of vicarious trauma. Things like increased cynicism, exhaustion, difficulty concentrating, maybe emotional numbing.
Right.
The sources strongly recommend implementing proactive self-care strategies. These aren't luxuries, they are professional necessities.
Okay.
They include regular self-reflection, maybe journaling or talking to a trusted peer, structured self-evaluation of your own practice and reactions, and crucially, peer support or supervision. These practices are vital for maintaining effectiveness, resilience, and your capacity to continue doing this challenging but vital work.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting and maybe shifts the perspective for some. The sources argue that being trauma-informed changes not just how you interact with individuals, but how you see the entire organization you serve. It essentially allows you to see the system itself through a trauma lens.
Exactly. It helps you illuminate systemic issues that might otherwise remain hidden. Instead of seeing individual problems or complaints in isolation, you start seeing patterns and trends. Patterns that suggest how trauma isn't just something individuals bring with them. It can be rooted in or exacerbated by systemic factors within the organization.
Like what?
Things like inequitable policies, inconsistent leadership, maybe poor communication practices, or a culture that just lacks psychological safety. You begin to spot the echoes of difficult experiences in repeated complaints or anxieties.
So it encourages a fundamental shift in perspective from asking, what is wrong with this person who seems so reactive or distrustful, to asking, how might our systems, our policies, our leadership culture, or our communication practices be contributing to these issues or making it harder for people to cope?
That's the core shift.
Mm,
And what's powerful here is how ombuds can use this trauma lens while absolutely maintaining their neutrality and confidentiality.
right, that's key.
You are not diagnosing individuals or sharing their stories.
Hmm.
The sources suggest using anonymized, aggregated data from many interactions to highlight trends framed through this lens. For example, instead of saying many people are traumatized by the new attendance policy, you might observe and report on a trend of, I don't know, heightened anxiety, expressions of feeling powerless, and increased conflict surrounding the implementation of the new attendance policy,
Okay.
suggesting a need to examine the process or impact of the policy through a lens of psychological safety and predictability.
And using that aggregated data to advocate for trauma-informed policies or practices at a systemic level, like suggesting flexible deadlines or increased support resources after a major organizational change that might have been experienced as traumatic by many, or advocating for manager training on recognizing and responding to distress in a supportive way. All of this done without breaching individual confidentiality, using your neutral position to provide systemic feedback.
Precisely. This approach helped shift the organizational conversation away from blaming individuals for perceived poor performance or difficult behavior and towards a shared responsibility for creating safer, more supportive, and more resilient environments. By framing concerns and observations through a trauma-informed lens, you significantly enhance your role as a trusted advisor, helping leaders proactively identify and remedy systemic issues before they escalate.
It truly positions the Ombuds as a catalyst for broader organizational change, even from that informal, neutral space.
So maybe let's quickly compare approaches. The sources offer some clear contrasts that really highlight the difference in practice between a non-trauma informed and a trauma-informed approach.
Great idea. Yeah, let's do that. Think about how an initial meeting might start. A non-trauma informed approach might be very direct, perhaps demanding details up front. Tell me exactly what happened. I need all the facts to understand your situation.
Right, that approach prioritizes information gathering over the visitor's current state and control versus a trauma-informed approach. Thank you for coming in today. You control what we discuss and the pace we go. Would you like to start by sharing what feels comfortable right now?
Much different. It immediately offers control and choice, creating a sense of safety from the outset.
Exactly.
Or imagine discussing sensitive or potentially shaming topics, like why someone waited a long time to come forward. A non-trauma informed question might be, why didn't you report this sooner?
Which risks re-traumatization by demanding justification, implying judgment, and ignoring potential systemic or personal barriers
Yeah.
that might have prevented earlier action.
Yeah.
The trauma-informed approach is softer, an open-ended invitation that embeds choice and removes blame. Would you feel comfortable sharing what factors might have influenced your decision about when to come forward?
Okay. When it comes to decision-making or exploring options, a non-trauma-informed ombuds might take a more directive stance, perhaps recommending options based on their expertise. Based on what you've told me, here are the 3 options I recommend. Let's pick the best one.
Which centers the ombud's expertise and diminishes the visitor's agency at a time when they need it most. The trauma-informed way is collaborative and prioritizes the visitor's goals and independence. Let's explore some possibilities together based on what outcomes feel most meaningful to you.
Much more empowering. And finally, handling emotional reactions during a meeting. Non-trauma informed might dismiss or try to quickly shut down emotions, skip back to the facts. Okay, let's try to stay calm and focused on the facts. How do you want to proceed?
Ugh, yeah. Invalidating their very real distress and rushing past a critical moment. A trauma-informed approach acknowledges the difficulty, validates the emotion, and offers support. I notice this seems very difficult to talk about. That's understandable. Would you like to pause for a moment or try a simple grounding technique, like focusing on your breath, before we continue?
Yeah.
It focuses on their present needs and capacity.
These comparisons really underscore that the shift isn't just about what you talk about, but how you are in the space with the visitor. It circles back perfectly to that core principle the sources repeatedly emphasize. Trauma-informed care isn't about treating trauma, it's about not re-traumatizing.
Which means focusing relentlessly on safety, choice, collaboration, trustworthiness, and empowerment in every single interaction, every single communication, every single policy you advocate for. It's a way of being and seeing, not just a checklist of things to do.
So we've covered the essential why behind trauma-informed practice for ombuds, how it's foundational for safety, trust, and even organizational health. We've explored the practical how in communication and visitor support, emphasizing transparency, choice, and sensitive language.
Hmm.
We've delved into the crucial importance of self-awareness for both personal and professional well-being and effectiveness, and we've discussed the expanded view it offers on identifying and addressing systemic issues within your organization.
And through all of this, remember how being trauma-informed strengthens your ability to uphold your core ombuds values: neutrality, confidentiality, independence, and informality. This perspective doesn't compromise them. It enhances your capacity to live them authentically while reducing harm and better supporting those in distress.
Now consider, what's one mindset or practice you'll commit to refining after today? You are invited to think about what insights you would like to share with your buddies. Remember, this is about progress, not perfection.